infinite complacence, people went to and fro over the earth about their little affairs, serene in the assurance of their dominion over this small, spinning fragment of solar driftwood, which by chance or design man has inherited out of the dark mystery of time and space.
On this edition of Into the Fray, I welcome Suzanne back on with me, and of course this is part 2 of what I titled the confirmation event, and part 1 was of course this very previous episode 390, and that makes this 391. Suzanne, I just felt like for some reason that name kind of sunk into me to name the episode. Of course it was in reference to a single really stunning event, but I feel like most all of the things that you shared could be a confirmation event of, in some way, shape, or form for most people, and probably for you.
Yeah, probably. I think you're right about that. Although at the time that these things were taking place, I would not consider any of them to confirm anything because, like I said, I thought I was just dreaming and or had a very vivid imagination. But that one event with my daughter, when she, basically reiterated on everything that had happened the previous night, I knew that I finally had confirmation that I wasn't insane. Well, maybe I was insane, but at least I knew that somebody else was seeing my insanity.
Yeah, you sure weren't alone, and we hear that a lot. People are like, man, if there was only just another person to share this with. And I will say, and I'd hazard to say you'd probably agree that considering what we're going to be talking about today, which includes some of your husband's own experiences, which, as you say, is integral to your own. So I think it's important that we cover as much of that as you want. But I would hazard to say that they should probably go back to the very last episode, iTF 390, and start from the beginning, right?
Right, probably.
Yeah. I mean, especially when you have things that happen from a young age, I think that plays a huge part in things. And of course, just your learning and growing, good or bad for some people, through these experiences.
Right, right. I think it's really been difficult for me because so many things have happened to try and keep things in chronological order. And so I found myself after our last interview that there were a couple of things that I had forgotten to include, but it might actually be easier for me to do that now because, like I had said before, it seemed like part of this experience that I have been having in my life with these visitations from whoever they were, if they were alien, if they were from another dimension. At the time, I didn't know. And I really still don't know either. Do we really know where they're from? But having these experiences opened up so many other doors in my life. And I felt like I was becoming extremely psychic and having these precognitive dreams. And I also was experiencing some psychic flashes and a lot of synchronicity. It's so strange because maybe a lot of people just don't pay attention to those things and maybe just brush it off, say, oh, what a weird coincidence, and then just go about their day. But for me, whenever I would have one of these really remarkable coincidences, I would always make a note of them because they just seemed so out of this world, if I can put it that way. So I wanted to go back to something that happened to me when I was in high school. And this involved a synchronicity. My mother and my father had divorced, and my mother had remarried a man who was from the Caribbean. He was a sailor. Our ex next door neighbors had moved to Florida. my mother and my stepfather decided that they were going to charter a boat in the Caribbean. My mother was a chef and he was a captain of a boat. And so they dropped us off in Florida to stay with the best friends while they went to the Caribbean for 2 weeks. But what happened on the way was very interesting. My sister and myself and my parents were in the airport and we were sitting in the waiting area to board the plane. And as we're sitting there, there was this young kid right around my age, and he was absolutely gorgeous. I mean, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie The Blue Lagoon,
Mm-hmm.
but there's this young kid on that with this blonde curly hair, and he was like Brooke Shields, like they were marooned on an island. Well, he looked just like that kid. Okay, I had a boyfriend in high school, but I was in a very abusive relationship, unfortunately. And this was the very first time that I was going to be away from him, and he was not happy about it. And I was extremely ecstatic about it. Let's just put it that way. So I'm sitting here and I'm looking at that kid, and I was just like, oh my God, I was blushing because he was so good looking. And I noticed that he was looking at me too. So we ended up getting on the same plane, and he was sitting right in front of us. And he kept looking between the 2 seats at me, and I could see him, and I was so embarrassed. I like, the entire flight, we had a layover in Texas. So, we got off our plane in Texas, and then we went to the next, gate, and when we went there, he and his family were there again, just like us, and I'm like, "What the heck?" So, it's like 2 o'clock in the morning, we're sitting in this pretty much empty airport, they're sitting in the same area, we're still staring at each other. And, we get on the plane, and they get on our plane again, and we fly to, I think we flew to Atlanta. In Atlanta, my parents were flying off to Miami, and so my sister and I were gonna fly by ourselves to Pensacola, Florida, where my friends lived. So we say goodbye to my parents, and we go to the next gate, and when we sit there, they're there again, that same kid, and I'm thinking, "Oh my god. What is happening?" This is he following me? I mean, this is just too ironic. So we end up getting on the same plane to Pensacola, and I'm thinking, what are the odds? All the way from LAX to Pensacola. So we get off the plane in Pensacola, and I see my friends. We get in their car. We're driving to their house. And as we drive up to their house, a car is behind us, pulls up behind us, and pulls into the driveway next door. And out walks the kid from the plane. They were their next door neighbor.
What? Okay, now it's weird.
And I looked at him and I screamed and I ran in the house and I slammed the door. And my friends are like, "What is going on with you?" And I said, "You're not going to believe this. Oh my God. Oh my God." And I said, "That kid next door." And they go, "Oh, you mean TR?" I said, "I have no idea what his name is." But then all of a sudden there was a knock on the door. And they opened it. It was him, and he just walked in. He walked in their house and he said, "Hi, I think I should introduce myself." So we ended up having a really interesting 2 weeks, needless to say. But yeah, that was like the first time I had experienced such an odd synchronicity that I actually wrote it in my diary. But yeah, so I think that's when it really began for me. And like I said, I was 17 for sure. Exactly. I remember that.
Now, was there something special over the 2 weeks as far as a bond, a special bond with him or something like that? Are you lifelong friends now? Was there any kind of a culmination to that very strange meeting of someone from across the country being their next door neighbor? Super weird.
Nothing happened. I mean, he did say, "Let me show you around, this area." And so we did go out to the local beach at night and walk down to the pier, and there was a red tide. So I had never seen a red tide before. So that was really cool. And so we were putting our feet in the water and making like, these blue trails, and you could see the fish swimming around. But after that 2 weeks, I never saw or heard from him again. And when I got back home, Like I said, I had a very possessive, abusive boyfriend, so if I even looked sideways, that was the end of that, so
Mm-hmm.
we just kind of lost touch,
Well, that
and
that is
yeah,
a crazy what a small world situation right there.
definitely was, so and then I had another situation where, when I was in high school again, I had this guy when I was with the same boyfriend, there was a guy in my class who had a huge crush on me, and he was on the football team, and I was a cheerleader. Actually, I was the mascot. I wasn't really a cheerleader, but same thing.
That's even
And,
better.
yeah.
You're the mascot? That's
So
amazing.
I know I was a panther. Yeah,
Nice.
yeah. So, he had a crush on me, and he would walk down the hall and pinch my butt. And I would turn around and be like, "Chuck, stop it, knock it off," and he would just laugh and walk away. Then he would enlist all of his friends to walk up to me and tell me that I needed to break up with my boyfriend to go out with him. And I was like, "Nah, I don't think that's gonna happen." Well, eventually, after high school, I did break up with my boyfriend, and when I did, I remembered about Jack, but I found out he had a girlfriend. So that was over, and then I started dating a friend of his, and then he broke up with his girlfriend. So we had this we kept missing each other type of thing where we just never were able to have that first date until after my divorce. My mother saw him at the grocery store and he asked how I was doing. And she said, "Oh, well, she's getting a divorce." And he called me up and he says, "Guess what? We're going out." And I said, "Yep, I guess you're right." So we went out and it was a total disaster. And we decided that we were just better off friends. We went about our lives and I didn't see him for a while, a couple of years. What happened was I I got married, went on my honeymoon to Greece, of all places. And I had planned my honeymoon to return the day before my high school reunion, my 10-year high school reunion. So we went there. It was like beautiful weather. We were there in, I think it was in June, end of May, beginning of June. We went to Santorini and Mykonos, and then we ended up in Athens because we were going to be flying from there. So we're sitting in Athens. We're having a beer. It was super hot. And we're sitting in this area called the Plaka, which is basically all these little business or streets all converge into one little circle area. And we're drinking this beer, and I could hear the people talking behind my husband. And the girl was saying, "Oh my God," I was like so embarrassed. And I said to my husband, I said, "That girl's from the Valley, from LA." I could just tell by her Valley girl accent. I said, "What are the odds?" And so I keep hearing them talking. And I kind of tilted my head to the side, and I could see the guy that she was talking to. He had dark sunglasses on, but I recognized him from elementary school, junior high, and high school as being my first kiss. The boy that first kissed me when I was in 6th grade was sitting behind
Wow.
my husband. And I thought, "Wait a minute." And so I said, "Scott?" And he lifted his glasses up and he said, "Oh my God, what are you doing here?" And I said, "I'm on my honeymoon." And he says, "Well, I'm here for a triathlon." He was there with my ex stalker. I'm going to say stalker, but the guy from high school, Jack. They were there together. I said, "You've got to be kidding me." So he ended up saying, "Okay, listen, this is really strange." I said, "Don't tell Jack that you saw me and let's get together tonight." I mean, what were the odds that that same guy from high school was there when I was on my honeymoon, okay? After not being able to, like, get connected all those years of, wanting to see each other, go on a date. So we went out that night, and we ended up meeting them at this, restaurant. They had also planned their trip around our 10-year high school reunion, so we ended up sitting together at the high school reunion,
After seeing each
which
other
is
in Greece, of all
the
places.
day the day before,
Wow.
yes. And then he ended up getting married to the girl he was with. So I saw the fire fire truck in the parking lot pull up when I was getting a bagel, and I saw Jack get out of the fire truck and come into the bagel shop, and we basically just, compared notes and to see how we were doing in our lives, and it turned out that, his wife was pregnant, and she was 3 months pregnant, and so was I, and then we found out that our doctors were partners, and I thought, "Well, that was really interesting, what a weird coincidence again." We decided to keep in touch because we just thought it was so strange that we were due in, such a short amount of time, like a week apart. So, towards the end of our pregnancy, we found out that, his wife's baby had turned breech. Her due date was May 24th, and mine was May 19th. They found out that they were gonna have to do a cesarean because the baby had turned breech. It turned out that she went in to have her surgery, and I ended up being early. We ended up having our babies on the same day, and when he found out that I was in labor and in the hospital, he actually showed up at the hospital after his wife had had the baby and walked into my hospital room the day after, and he's like, "I can't believe this." He said, "What is it with us that we always have these synchronicities?" I said, "I have no idea." But the weirdest thing that happened is both of our daughters ended up going to school together and were friends. So, yeah, I just thought that was a weird synchronicity.
I love stories like that. That is so strange.
I know, I know. So, I just thought I would share those because, from then on, I really started paying close attention to synchronicities for the rest of my life. So, I would write them down and especially if I had like weird dreams and stuff. And, when I started my blog, I would write about these synchronicities and about these dreams and try and put the pieces of the puzzle together because for some reason I really felt that all of this was connected. And when I was writing my blog, it really helped me a lot to, as I started doing more meditations and stuff, I started getting downloads. And so I would write these downloads down because I felt that I was being given messages that were really important. One day I got an email from Whitley Strieber. I was just completely blown away that he was emailing me because he was the one who started this journey for me when I read Communion in 1987. So he said that he had read my blog. Somebody had shared my blog with him, and he wanted to interview me for his show on Unknown Country called Dreamland, which I knew all about because I listened to it. And I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that after all this time, everything was coming full circle. After all these years of trying to figure out what was going on with me from 1987, here it was 2012, and I was going to be interviewed by Whitley Strieber himself. So I did that interview. It was April 20th of 2012. It was really amazing, and after the show, I shared my contact information because, as I had said in my blog, I wanted people to reach out to me and share their experiences, as I really felt that maybe if we all commune together, we might be able to make sense of what's really happening to us. And so I was just inundated with emails. It was just really overwhelming. I thought, "Oh my gosh, what have I done?" But I was grateful on the other hand because it was really helpful to connect people who had similar stories to mine, just being a conduit. I really felt strongly that that was part of my path was being a conduit here. So it was my pleasure to be able to connect these people. So I also shared my Facebook profile and that they can connect with me that way. So one day, I think it was in July, I was writing my book. I started writing a book actually because I thought, you know what? I've got so much going on here. And I've been reading so much about other people's experiences and seeing that other people are writing books about their experiences as well. I thought, well, you know what? Maybe I should do this. I think it's really important because everybody's experience is different. And if we can just connect with one person that makes a difference, then it's worth it. So one day I'm living in West Hollywood and it's late in the afternoon and I'm writing. And all of a sudden, I got a direct message. Being as I had been doing a lot of meditation, I felt like the lines of communication were always open. And the message was quite strange. And it said for me to close my computer, to go into the bedroom, sit on the floor, face the armoire, and meditate for 5 minutes. And I thought, okay, well, that was pretty specific. But I did as I was told, and I went to the bedroom and sat in front of the armoire and meditated for 5 minutes, and nothing happened. I thought I was getting a message or something, and nothing happened. I was kind of bummed out because I was kind of in a groove with my writing, and so now I was distracted. So I went back into the living room, I opened my computer, and I thought, I'll just get on Facebook and just browse a little bit and see what's going on. And then right as I did so, I got a little instant message. I looked at it and I didn't recognize the person, but there was like a little teeny thumbnail of their picture in the corner. And even though it was so small, I'm like, oh my God, why does that guy look so familiar? But I didn't recognize the name. He had said that he had recognized my profile from Whitley's interview on Dreamland and that he had connected with me. And friend requested me back like in April, which I completely had forgotten. But now that I'm seeing his profile picture, I'm thinking, well, maybe I do recognize him. So I clicked on his profile and I kind of browsed like his pictures a little bit just to see if maybe I recognized him like in another photograph, or maybe we had some mutual friends, which we did not. And he lived in Rhode Island and I lived in, California. I'd never been to Rhode Island before, so that was a no. So I'm like, okay, well, why do I recognize this guy? So I clicked on some more pictures and I came across this one photograph of this beautiful, beautiful woman holding a small little boy on her lap. And I'm looking at her and she's like looking right at me. And it was kind of freaking me out because I felt like as I'm looking at this photograph, she's speaking to me telepathically, like I'm reading her picture. And I'm kind of freaking out. And I typed in the little chat box. I said, so can I ask you a question? I said, so who is this really beautiful woman with this little boy? And he says, well, that's my wife. And I said, she's no longer with us, is she? And he said, no, she's not. She passed away in 1997. And I said, oh my gosh, I have a message for you. And all of a sudden, I felt like I was a conduit for her to him. And she starts speaking to me telepathically. She says, please tell him that I love him and that I miss him and that I'm all around him all the time. I said, you are going to see her someday. And he said, yes, I know I will see her someday. And he says, I'm so glad that you're telling me this. It's just really hitting me hard today because today would have been her 50th birthday. And I said, you're kidding me. And it was July 7th of 2012. And I said, how strange, because today is my best friend's 50th birthday. Also, it's also my wedding anniversary. Well, that's interesting. Just all these little coincidences and synchronicities again. I said, you know what? I'm also 50. That's really strange. And he said, oh, really? Well, so am I. I said, really? I said, well, when's your birthday? And he said, March 26, 1962. And that is my exact birthday.
What the heck?
Yeah. So I typed in the little chat box. I said, That is my exact birthday. That's the same day I was born. And we figured out that we were born 9 months apart. I'm sorry, 9 hours apart. I just couldn't figure out what was happening. But one of the message that I had received not too long prior from that was that to pay very close attention to those that I have the most synchronicity with because they are in my life for a reason. And so I remembered that when I heard him tell me his birth date. And then we started going through all these other weird synchronicities. Like we have the same exact, our first car was the same car, like all these weird things. Our children were like basically right around the same ages. So we just really thought, wow, what is the meaning for this? He says, you know what? I pay very close attention to synchronicities. And so there was something behind this. And I said, you're absolutely right. But we wanted to figure out, well, what is the reason for this? And then I said, well, maybe we knew each other before this incarnation, because come to find out, he was also an experiencer. Now, thinking about my message to Ryan, I thought, oh my gosh, maybe this is him. This is the person who's being put before me. He's a father. He's an experiencer. He has a great sense of humor. He seems very kind. So I thought, you know what? We'll just keep, this line of communication open. We just decided, maybe there's something about our childhood that we should revisit because he had had a lot of childhood experiences as well. Now, when I was a little girl, I always thought that I had a brother. And I always asked my mother, I said, where's my brother? And she said, what are you talking about? And I said, I know I have a brother. Did you give him up for adoption? And she said, no, honey, I've never had another boy child. I've never had another, little boy. And I was like, yes, you did. And I thought maybe she had a miscarriage or something because I always thought I had a brother. And I thought, oh my gosh, maybe it's Jack. If we had known each other prior to this incarnation and we were born on the same day. I mean, with how weird this is within this phenomenon, how do I know that that is not the case? But
Right.
I mean, obviously, it's just like the energy. It's not like it was just our energies that were familial. So we just kept that in the back of our head. And, we kept sharing pictures of each other when we were little kids that maybe we might have seen each other during another experience. So I shared a picture of myself with him when I was in junior high, and I was dressed up like the emperor from my visitation on the craft when I was 9. I dressed like him. And when he saw the picture, he said it felt like somebody had punched him in the stomach. And I said, what do you mean? And he says, I don't know. I don't know. He ended up saying that he looked right at that picture and recognized me and said that he was sorry that he couldn't help me. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Now, I had never had a regression, so if there were things that had happened that I don't remember, they could have been, malevolent. And maybe that's why I don't remember them. And so I kind of panicked when he said this, that he recognized me. So it's kind of like I didn't want to know. Do you know what I mean? So I just kind of forgot about that for
Yeah,
a
because
while.
there
But we
was
ended up,
all those kids facing the wall, right?
yes, yes,
Mm,
exactly. I didn't know what they looked like.
right.
And none of them turned around to look at me either.
But
But
maybe in a part that
uh,
you don't remember, he remembers seeing you there.
correct,
Wow.
definitely. So we just thought, okay, well, we'll just keep in touch. And so we did throughout the summer. And then I was asked to speak at a conference in Maine it was the first weekend of September of 2012, a couple months after we had this conversation. During that time, we had been communicating on Facebook, and then we graduated to talking on the phone. And then we ended up Skyping, just how the progression of a relationship. And we ended up falling in love over the summer, long distance. it was just, I mean, undeniable. It was just like I had to be with him. So when the conference date was nearing, he said, "You know what? I am going to drive up and meet you from Rhode Island." And I thought, "Oh my gosh, really? Okay." I was like super nervous but excited. Then he said to me, "Would you consider moving here to be with me?" And I thought, "Oh my God, okay, well, I didn't really have anything keeping me in California. My kids were grown and, I could basically be a hairdresser anywhere, so I could take my trade with me." And I thought, "You know what? Let me think about it." And so I decided that when we were going to meet in Maine, that I would stay in Rhode Island for a couple of weeks afterwards and then decide if that's what I wanted to do. So in the interim, he's also a Reiki master, which is interesting because he's actually a Teamster. He worked for UPS for 35 years, and definitely the last thing you would think a Teamster in New England to be would be a Reiki master. But I thought that was really awesome because I knew that he was open to alternative energy. And he actually performed remote Reiki on me one night and was spot on. So I knew that he was the real deal. It was amazing. So one night we were chatting on the phone. Actually, I think we were Skyping. And all of a sudden, he heard like this whistle in the background. And he's like, "Oh my gosh, do you hear that?" And I said, "Hear what?" He goes, "Don't you hear that whistle?" And I said, "No." And I said, "Well, what did it sound like?" And he whistled it. And it was actually a part of the song called Patience by Guns N' Roses, where he whistles in the very beginning of the song.
Mm-hmm.
And so he took that literally, like we were trying to be patient to see each other. And it was really, really difficult. Like we were counting the days. So I went to Maine and spoke at the conference, and he met me there, and it was really great. And then we came back, or we were coming back to Rhode Island for 2 weeks, and we decided that we were gonna drive through, New Hampshire. Now, Kathleen Martin was at this conference. She was speaking about the Betty and Barney Hill incident, and so we decided that we wanted to go to the landmark where the abduction took place. And so we went over to ask her where it was, and then she said, "Well, if you wanna know where they found the car, I can tell you where that is too." I said, "Really? I didn't even know about that." Apparently, the car where they found it was not in the location where the landmark is. It was a little further ways away. So she gave us the address of the street, I should say. And so when we went back in the car, we put the address in the GPS and we went to the landing site. And then we decided to go to where the car ended up. So as we're driving through this forest, I started to get a little freaked out because, here, as much as Jack and I had gotten to know each other over the summer, I didn't really know him. You know what I mean? It was like I knew about him, but here I'm in this car with this guy driving through this really dense forest. It's, getting late. It's getting dark. There's no street lights. Nobody knows where I am. We're losing cell service, all this stuff. And I just start panicking. But I thought, you know what? I'm just going to have to trust it. And so we keep driving. We follow the GPS and it says to turn left on this one street. And so as we turn left on this one street, there's an X on the street. And I am like, well, that's really strange because we didn't put an address down. It just showed up as an X. And so we thought, well, that's really odd. So we just kept driving and then we stopped at the X. And when we stopped at the X, we looked across to our right and it was a huge empty field. And I thought, what are the odds that this is exactly where the car was found, even though there's no address? And he goes, "Ooh, maybe we'll see a UFO." And so we got out of the car And we're sitting there staring at the sky, and he like put his arm around me and he kissed me, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is really scary. And then as I'm kissing him, I pulled away and I looked at his face, and his face had morphed into a gray. And I'm like freaked out. I ran to the car. I said, we need to get out of here right now. And he ran to the car and he goes, yes, we do. And he got in the car, turned the car on, and he just like peeled out, just like took off and was driving really, really fast. I'm like gripping the seat, thinking, oh my God, what am I doing? I need to like open the door and duck and roll. I need to get out of this car. I was so scared. Pretty soon we saw a street light and I realized, okay, we're getting to like where I'm gonna have cell service again. He's kind of like white knuckling his steering wheel, and we're kind of like side eyeing each other. We're driving along, and I said, you know what? Can we find some place to get a beer real quick? And he's like, I think that's a great idea. So we find a little pub. We go in, we sit down, ordered a beer. I drank it so fast. I was so nervous. And then I looked at him and I said, I need to tell you something. He goes, I need to tell you something too. And I looked at him and I said, when we were kissing, your face turned into a gray. He's like, oh my God, when we were kissing, your first face turned into a gray too. And I thought, oh my God, what is happening? So we were both seeing each other the same way. Were our eyes playing tricks on us? Did we really, was it just like a screen memory or something? But I thought, is this part of who we are? And it was showing up in this way because we're connecting. It was just the scariest, freakiest thing. And we were going to spend the night that night in New Hampshire. But we were so freaked out, we drove all the way to Rhode Island just to be somewhere familiar.
Oh, I don't
So,
quite know what to make of that one. That's I mean, I guess at least it wasn't just you, but at the same time, what does that all mean that you're both seeing the same thing like that?
I don't know. It was just kind of freaky. I
Yeah.
just, sometimes you hear people say, oh, when they talk about like the hybrid program, which I don't really have any direct affiliation with, I don't think, that they feel like they're part gray, but maybe they just don't appear to be a gray. Do you know what I'm saying? So maybe there's something in all of our lineage. Maybe we're all from somewhere else, technically.
Right.
So anyway, so that was really strange. And we drove back to the house and I stayed here for a couple of weeks. And after the 2 weeks, I decided that I was going to move here. The day that I was going to fly back to California, Hurricane Sandy hit. And so all the airports were closed and I wasn't able to leave. So I had to reschedule my flight and I ended up staying for another 6 weeks. It was really strange because I had heard some things from his daughters who were living with him at the time that they had had some strange things happen in this house. So I thought, well, that's kind of interesting. And ghostly apparitions and strange things like that don't really bother me. So it didn't really scare me that much, but he told me that one of their friends, I think it was actually his nephew, they saw a hat man upstairs walking down the hall, a guy with like a bowler hat on. Then I also one day was home alone. He was at work. Actually, it was at night. And I'm sitting in the den, and all of a sudden I heard this, hey, coming from the living room. It was like a deep man's voice coming from the living room. I wasn't afraid at all. It was kind of like, hey, what's up? So I just thought it was quite anomalous, but I thought, okay, maybe there is some sort of spirit in this house, and it didn't seem to be, threatening at all. But one day I was taking a shower and I'm in the shower and I heard a man's voice in the bathroom say, good girl.
Mm. Nope.
Okay. Thought, what? So I opened the shower curtain and there was nobody there. And when I told my boyfriend, he's like, "Yeah, I don't know. We do have a lot of weird stuff happening." But to me, it was almost like the voice was kind of an endearing, like say maybe like a grandfather was giving, the granddaughter a bath or something. It was just really a sweet, little voice. It wasn't anything that I was afraid of, but I just thought it was interesting.
Well, at least there's that, because in my mind, because I hear so many creepy things, I automatically went to the creep factor. So sorry about that. I was like, oh, nope. But that's good if it wasn't creepy.
Yeah. Yeah. So I wasn't really that concerned, and I don't know. I think it's the way that you look at it. And although I have heard of creepy things happening to creepy people, but nothing like that has ever happened to me here. We've actually had a couple of house guests, and one of them said that they saw a woman come out of the closet upstairs into the room and then disappear. I thought that was
And
interesting.
you're in the same house right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah. And things have gone missing and then will reappear, just literally like an hour later where I was looking for it on the same spot that I left it, and then it was gone. And then when I came back, it was right where I left it.
Are these things that you
So,
have quite a need for?
yeah, like for example, this is really funny. You should say that. The other day I was cooking and my oregano was sitting right in front of me, was gone. And I looked everywhere and I'm thinking, okay, did I put it in the refrigerator? Did I put it in the other room? I looked everywhere. I thought, okay, I'm going to have to improvise. And then I came back into the room. When I did, it was right there again where I left it. Like it was put right back where it was missing. So,
Aren't those
anyway,
so strange? Where do they go in the interim? Where do they go? These
in another
objects.
dimension.
It's so
I think,
strange.
well, funny you should say that because that kind of leads into my next little entry here on my bullet points. So, one night, I think it was the end of December of 2013. So I've been living here about a year. One night I was kind of just watching TV, and then my boyfriend came home from work. He worked the night shift. He worked at UPS. And he ended up coming home probably about 3:30 in the morning, which is pretty normal hours for us. So we would go to bed sometimes about 5 o'clock in the morning and maybe wake up at about 1. So this particular day, or this particular evening, we were watching a little TV before bed, and then when we went to bed, he fell asleep right away. And then when I went to lay down, I realized that one of the windows was super bright and the other one was really dark. And I thought, well, that's weird. Why is that light coming through the window? So I got up and I pulled the curtain back. And in the tree, I saw what looked like a shutter of a camera collapse on itself, but it was a light. So it just went zhoosh and just disappeared. And I said, that was so weird. And then I said, did you see that? But he wasn't awake. He was asleep, so he didn't see it. So I thought, huh, all right. So I just went to bed. So when I woke up in the morning, he was already awake, which is odd because I was usually the first one awake, and then he would usually wake up after me. So I got up and I started walking down the hallway. And when I passed the den, he was sitting in the den drinking a cup of coffee. And he looked at me and I startled him. And he said, "Where did you come from?" And I said, "What do you mean, where did I come from?" He goes, "Well, when I woke up, you weren't in bed." I said, "What do you mean I wasn't in bed?" And I started to freak out. When somebody tells you you weren't in bed, I mean, that's scary. So I said, "Okay, what do you mean?" He goes, "Didn't you hear me calling your name?" I said, "No." He's like, "When I woke up, you weren't here, and I thought you had gone Christmas shopping with my daughters because they were gone." And I said, "I'm clearly still wearing my pajamas. So how could I have been somewhere else?" He says, "Okay, well, I am telling you, you were in bed." I said, "Oh my God, what are you telling me right now?" So I'm panicked. And I'm thinking, oh my God, where was I? So I'm trying to go into like recovery mode, thinking, where was I? Where was I? And I'm trying to remember if I had a weird dream. I couldn't think of anything. But all of a sudden, I got this image of this picture of something. And I said, you know what? I need a piece of paper and a pen. So I started drawing this drawing. And what it was I felt like I was impressed on me, or what was impressed on me was somebody was trying to describe something to me that I could describe to someone else by showing me these figures. And what it was if you take a slinky and if you fan the slinky out, and then if you take another slinky and then a smaller one, and then you fan that one out, and then you bisect them. And where those two slinkies bisect is where all of the dimensions overlap. And that is how people can drop in to different timelines. And that's why ghosts appear, and that's where UFOs appear, and all these different timelines. It's all through that little area like a portal. And so I drew this, and I feel very much that that's why we have these experiences. Like, I must have gone somewhere and then come back. Like, we go through space, hurling through space, going through all these different areas where there are the portals and things slip in and slip out. Like when people see ghost cities, I always thought that was really strange too, but I thought that might have something to do with it. Or even like residual energies. Like maybe they play on a time loop and then you cross through them again. I don't know. But I couldn't talk about this for the longest time because I'd never had anybody not see me. Do you know what I'm saying? So I really feel like I went somewhere else during the night, and it had something to do with that light in the tree.
Now, of course, there's the light in the tree, so technically, you could, I guess, call that a UFO in some way, shape, or form, right? But on part one, we talked about silver tic tac UFO, green, I think it was green flashes of light, and then there was more kind of a lights in your bedroom situation. But besides that light in the tree that you just mentioned, was there anything else going on around that time? Any craft or odd lights, in the sky overhead, anything like that?
Mm, no, not that I can think of now. Not on my end. Maybe on Jack's end, and maybe I'll get to that in a bit. Maybe, I mean, he did see a lot of things when he was at work and stuff, but
Mm-hmm.
I don't think anything around this time, no. But I thought it was interesting that, I hadn't really seen, the last time I had seen the Greys was in 2012, the beginning of the year.
Right.
So here it is 2013, and I don't see Greys, but I have this experience that I don't remember. So I'm not sure.
Well, I mean, you did
But
see kind of a gray though, when your first official
oh,
meeting.
that's true.
I
That's
mean,
true.
that's splitting hairs, I suppose, but
Yeah,
I guess in a way you kind of did, and so did
yeah,
Jack.
maybe that was
Mm.
it. I don't know.
Um, Before I forget this, because I do want
Mhm.
to know, and if I can, I'm sure I could find it quite easily, especially if he used your name, your first name. But I will link this amongst other things in the show notes. But what sorts of things did Whitley say about everything that you shared with him? And did he bring up hypnosis or regression? Is he a proponent for that? And specifically, did he bring that up for you, or does he agree that maybe it's best you don't know?
Yeah, I told him that I hadn't been regressed. I know that he has, and I was very adamant for myself that I didn't feel like the need to know things that might be, really terrifying, because I think that even the things that I do remember are scary enough, even though they don't seem, that malevolent. But he was really interested in something that I had written about. I'll have to dig that up. I had written something in my blog, one of my entries about comparing the Earth and humans in the universe, like how we're made of stars. I don't know. I can't remember. I have to look at it. But I just basically told him my story about he was, the one who opened my eyes to what was happening in my lifetime and shared a lot from my blog. And subsequently, we have kept in touch. When I did live in Hollywood, we did meet. I became very close with his wife, Anne, who's since passed away. Really enjoyed her friendship. She was really a sweet lady, very passionate about the work they were doing and very, very, very sorely missed. But they were just so in love. Oh my gosh. It was amazing, their friendship. Their friendship and their relationship was bar none. So yeah, that basically was it as far as the interview was concerned. I think it was basically just my sharing my story, and I think it was only like an hour long or so,
Mm-hmm.
but that was it.
Yeah, I apologize for
Um,
that digression. I wanted to make sure to
no,
touch base on that.
no,
And as I said, everybody can go to the show notes for various links. And Suzanne has mentioned her blog on this episode. It wasn't mentioned the first time around, but besides that, she has a podcast, which we're going to plug all of this in one fell swoop at the end. But you can go to the show notes and check out all of these things. And like I said, I'm going to try to track down that episode of Dreamland as well. So yeah, so the next thing on the list here, sorry about that, Suzanne, was the shared dream experience.
yes. So, okay. I hesitated to share this, but I think it's important because it's just so strange. And since I've had so many strange dreams before, and now I'm in this relationship with somebody that I'm, madly in love with. And so here we go. One night I had this dream where I was in a hotel and it was with one of my ex-boyfriends, which is just totally random, had no, importance at all in my relationship at the time. So we're in this hotel room. We are in bed. We were totally drunk. I don't know, for whatever reason, we had been to a party or something. And we're laying in bed. And as we're just laying there, the door flies open and in walk all these people setting up a production for a movie. There's like lights and, a boom mic, and there's a director and director's chairs and makeup artists and hairdressers and extras. And I'm like, what the hell is going on? And he's like, I don't know. And then through another door walk these two really petite Asian women with short black bobbed hair with bangs. And when I looked at them, they didn't really look like Asian women. They almost looked like grays with wigs on. So they walked over to my side of the bed, and when they did, one of them was holding a tray, and on that tray was some sushi. And she was offering it to me to eat, and I'm like, "Oh, no, 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 I can't, ugh, I'm so, like, drunk, I could not eat a thing." And then the other woman comes over, and she brings a carafe of wine, and she pours me a glass of wine. I said, "Oh my gosh, I can't drink anything else. Thank you anyway." And so they both turned around, and they exited the door, and when they did, I looked across the room, and they had gone into a room behind this huge window, okay? And when they went into the room where the huge window was, they gave the information to these other grays that were wearing, like, white doctor's coats, and they were writing notes down. I felt like they were gauging my reaction and then writing down, like, how I reacted on, like, a notepad or something, and I just thought that was really strange. Then all of a sudden, the director comes over, and he's telling us that he wants us to be in a pornographic film. Like, no, thank you. That's not happening. Okay. So I'm like, no, no, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. And then all of a sudden I'm waking up And as I'm waking up, I'm realizing that my boyfriend is being intimate with me as I'm waking up. I'm like, "Oh my gosh, what is going on?" And then he wakes up and he's like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to do that." And I said, "Whoa, what's going on?" He's like, "I don't know. It was just the weirdest thing. I was having the craziest dream." I said, "Oh my gosh, so was I. What was your dream?" And he said he dreamed that he was at a hotel. He was outside at the pool area and there was an outdoor shower. He went over to the outdoor shower. And it was weird because all these people were, like, walking around, like, it was just the middle of the day, and here he is, and he was not wearing any clothes, and he was in this shower, and all of a sudden, these 2 little, short Asian women walked over to him, and they had black, dark wigs on, and upon, looking at them further, realized that they looked like little grays with Asian wigs on, and they got in the shower with him, and then he woke up like that.
Yikes.
Having,
Wow. What the
relations with
hell?
me. I have no idea. Now, I don't understand, neither one of us could understand, how we had the same, or not the exact same, but a very similar experience. It seemed to me that either we were being tested or something. We always felt like from the very beginning of our relationship that we were being watched, like when we were being intimate. And sometimes when we would open the window, we would have a very strong smell of ozone, like an almost like an electrically charged aroma or odor coming in from the window. We thought that was quite strange because it didn't always smell like that. It only happened, like, during those moments, like intimate moments. Have you ever heard anything like that before?
I've heard of the ozone smell for sure, but I can't recall if it was during more intimate times. If that's the case, somebody please reach out to me if you have a better memory than
Yes.
I do and point me in the direction of what episode that was, or even if it's not on my show. But I've certainly heard of the ozone smell. Now, did the ones in the doctor's coats in your version of this, did those look like straight up gray aliens, or they still had the wigs on that they kind of looked humanish?
They looked humanish, but they looked more like aliens than human.
Mm.
So I don't know if they were like little nurses or something. I remember having another dream like that where one of them was in my dream that had a wig on, but I could tell it was a wig because it was on crooked. You know what I mean? Like they put it on like at the last minute and didn't do a very good job. Like they were trying to pass as a human, but it
Mm.
just didn't pass. You know what I mean? It was so weird.
We hear that a
So,
lot of whether it's something physical or an action that, well, this and demonic activity, I suppose, but they're trying really hard and they just can't seem to quite get it right.
wait, I have heard that before.
Mm-hmm.
So that was in, I don't know, like 2013 and then, or 2014. And then in 2015, living here in Rhode Island, one day I was in the backyard. It was actually in the summertime. It was, I think, August 4th, August 3rd or 4th. I was in the backyard cutting Jack's hair. It was a beautiful day. It was like later in the day. The sun had just set. It was still quite warm, but not too hot. And I remember I finished cutting his hair and then I just started walking across the yard for whatever reason. I have no idea what compelled me to do so. But as I'm walking across the yard, I looked to my right. Behind my house, there's a lake. And I looked towards the lake. And when I did, I saw a huge orange fiery orb coming up out of the lake. And I started screaming at Jack, come over here, come over here. Oh my God, you have to see this. Okay. So he runs over, and by the time he gets over to me, it had gone behind the tree line. So I said, it's going to come up right there on top of those trees. Just keep looking right there. And so we both sat there and waited and waited and waited, and it never reappeared. And I am like, "Oh my God, I can't understand where this thing went." This thing was enormous. It was like, from my vantage point, it was at least 10 feet in diameter. And what it looked like was, it looked like, okay, say like, you know how a pinball is really shiny and has like a hard edge, like metallic. Well, it looked like a pinball, but the interior of it was all roiling lava. Okay, and it looked like it was alive. And it just was rising very, very slowly, just seriously, so slow. And I'm thinking it wasn't the sun because the sun had already set. It was after 8 o'clock. And I thought maybe it was a fire or something across the lake. I just was trying, it wasn't a Mylar balloon. It wasn't anything like that. It was way too big. You go through the checklist of the things that it can't be, And so I just grabbed him by the shoulders and like, we have to go look for it. And he's like, no, 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 no. I'm like, you don't understand. We have to find it. And all of a sudden he was just so calm. And he looked at me, put his hands on my shoulders, and said, "What you saw was meant only for you." It was like it wasn't even him. And as he said that, a monarch butterfly flew right between our faces. I thought that was really weird. And I just said, "No, we're going and we're going to look for it now." And so he just said, "Okay." So we got in the car and we drove around the neighborhood. And I thought, you know what? At least one person had to have seen this. So I'm sure there's going to be somebody standing outside doing the same thing I am right now. But there was nobody there. Nobody was looking for anything. There was no fire across the other side of the lake. There were no fire trucks. There was nothing. And so I just went home and just like, I could not stop talking about it for the longest time. And then I went on to the UFO stalker again to see if anybody had reported anything. And there were no reports, no MUFON reports. So I thought, whatever, it's just one of those things again. But this is something I'd never seen before in my life. So the next day that was a Sunday. So the next day, Monday night, Jack was at work late. And then the next morning, we woke up at 6 o'clock in the morning to the electricity going off in our house. And then this really loud sound outside. And when I looked out the window, I couldn't see across my yard. What had happened was there was a microburst that had hit Warwick in this little area where I live, just this small area. We had about 1,500 lightning strikes in a minute. And it just was like devastation everywhere. All the trees were, tipped over. I was like so worried about my baby tomato plants that I just planted. So I wanted to go out and try and save them. And Jack was like, no, no, you can't go outside. You have to stay in the house. And then all of a sudden he was just standing in the kitchen, just staring at the glass window. And then the next couple of days, he started acting really weird. And we didn't have electricity for 4 days. And so he would come home from work and just like, first he started biting his cheek, and then he called me by his ex-girlfriend's name. And then I'm like, oh my God, I think he's having a stroke. So we went to the hospital, and then they sent us to another hospital by ambulance because he had a brain bleed. Turned out that they thought he might have a brain tumor, but it wasn't going to be confirmed until all the blood was reabsorbed back into his brain. When that happened, they found out that he didn't have a tumor, so we were very grateful for that. But he's since made a complete recovery. It was not a major stroke or anything. It was just a bleed. But we always thought that was really weird how this event, the orb, led up to all of these other things happening, like one after the other, and wondered if it was connected. Like it was a sign that something bad was going to happen. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
So I don't know. So since then, I've been on this orange orb alert. Like every time I hear an orange orb story, I just listen to all the details, because what's happening is I'm hearing a lot of people sharing these stories about these orbs and how they are describing them exactly the way that I saw mine, that it's like this roiling lava. So I actually contacted Whitley Strieber and I asked him what he thought about this sighting. And he told me that he felt like the interior of that orb were the souls of people who had passed. And I thought that was really interesting that he would say that.
That's definitely a nice
So I
thought, right?
right, it is. I mean, it might be nice if it was the case, but I mean, we really don't have any way of being able to prove exactly what it is. We just know that they happen all the time. Have
I
you ever heard anything?
no, not specific to souls being in them. No, that's a new one for me. I can say that. But as you say, there's no way to know. Maybe once we go into that next realm, we have all the answers. That would be pretty cool if that actually happens. A lot of people just think you become worm food and that's it. That's the end. But considering the stories shared from people having visitations and things, you have your own stories of things like that. I hazard to say that is not the case. So it's a positive thing to have at least some stories of people that go, no, there's something after, because I have a story to prove that. So it makes me feel better.
Exactly. Exactly.
And Suzanne, I have something that I just wanted to bring up, and I don't know if this is anything. It's probably nothing, but with you saying this orb came out of the lake, that you basically live right next to this lake, water and paranormal and UFOs and all of this stuff kind of coalesced in my brain. And full disclosure, I didn't look up the exact locations of the California residences that you've talked about previously, but I wanted to ask, and it may be nothing again, and I realize that a lot of people in California are near the ocean, but any of those locations, were you in proximity to lakes and rivers and any bodies of water for these other locations as well?
Um, Not in Pasadena, no. In Newbury Park, no. Camarillo, yes. And that was pretty close to the beach. We were probably about a 15-minute drive. Where I live now, I'm also like 5 minutes from the ocean,
Mm,
plus having the lake behind my house. So
okay.
there's water all around me here. I've seen a few UFOs. In fact, I saw one not too long ago, another daylight one, which I had rarely seen more daylight ones back in LA. So I haven't really seen any UFOs out here until 2015 also. And this one actually took place ironically the day that I was hearing my neighbors across the street. A grandfather was talking to his grandson, and the grandson was like, "Oh yeah, I totally believe in UFOs, Grandpa." And I was laughing inside, the house. I'm like, "That is so cute," because he's kind of young. He says, "Oh, well, yeah, I've been listening to all these podcasts and UFOs." And the grandfather, he's like, "Yeah, I believe in them too." And I'm like thinking, "Oh my gosh, I really want to talk to them because where I live, I don't really have anybody to talk to about this stuff, and there aren't a lot of people that are very open out here on the East Coast. It seems like a lot of people out here kind of keep to themselves for some reason. I don't know. I don't really know anybody in my neighborhood, maybe like 2 or 3 people, and I've lived here for almost 11 years. I decided this is really funny. I thought if I put my UFO I have a UFO magazine baseball cap, and I thought, "You know what? I'm just gonna walk the dog with that hat on, and if I run into them, maybe it'll just, spark a conversation." You know what I mean? So, sure enough, I get my dog and I see they are walking their dog, and so I thought, I'm gonna go the opposite direction, and as I walk up to them, they don't say anything. They're just like, "Hey, how's it going?" I'm like, "Good, how are you?" And then they just walked away, and I thought, "Darn it, I wish somebody would have said something about my hat." You know what I
You want
mean?
to like point, like lean forward, like you're Vanna White, like
Yeah,
turning the
yeah,
letters, right? Like
ex
hello.
exactly. So, anyway, I just thought, "Oh, well, maybe next time, whatever." So I kept walking my dog, and as I'm walking my dog, I look up and I'm like, "Oh my god, that's a UFO." I thought, "This is crazy, no way." What I saw was a silver oscillating disc. Now, I've seen at night through my night vision cameras, I've seen satellites, like ghost satellites that rotate and the mirror will flash in a pattern. I've seen that. But this was during the day and it wasn't that high up and it didn't have a pattern and it was not a mylar balloon. So I got my camera out, my cell phone camera out, started to record it. And I got it. I got it, and then it went behind a tree, and then I got it when it came out from behind the tree, and it just sat in the sky, stationary. And so I was able to photograph that, and I actually posted that on my blog, so I'll definitely reference that later if people want to see it.
UFO magazine isn't that Bill Burns?
Yes.
Yeah, I love him. He's awesome.
Yeah, totally. So yeah, that was the last time I actually saw a UFO during the daytime. I've seen many with my night vision camera, but otherwise, that's it. So I don't know what you want to talk about now. Shannon, do you want me just to start talking about Jack's experiences or?
Yeah, whatever you wanted to cover. Absolutely.
Okay, well, what happened was when Jack and I first started communicating and he told me that he was an experiencer, he told me some things, but not really in great detail. We were just more interested in the things that we had in common. But, since I started writing my blog and doing my podcast, he actually became my producer and started really getting involved in these people's stories. And so I said, you should write these things down because you don't want to forget this stuff because I think it's really important. When he was a young child, he would often find himself like frozen with fear, like before falling asleep, because he always felt like there was a presence in his room, which is interesting because I don't really remember having that myself. I was always basically just being brought back to my bed. So I didn't know if his was more like paranormal or if it was actually maybe grays in the room. But then he also said that he was able to astral project like I did. He said that he would fly away from his home, but he would never come back. I thought that was really interesting because most people always return back to their body, I think, when they astral project. So, and then he also remembered he was a little kid and he was playing with his like Tonka trucks in the backyard. And then sometimes a light would streak up from the ground to the sky. And then when that would happen, his first thought would be, wait, you're just going to leave me here? Why aren't you going to take me with you? So he was having all this anomalous stuff when he was a kid, happening like during the daytime instead of like a lot of abduction stuff that he recalled. He also in the 80s read communion like I did. He said that when he read the book, the one thing that really stuck out to him that really hit him viscerally was when Whitley told the story about how the visitors were asking him what they could do to help him stop screaming. And when Jack heard that, he had this feeling like that was really familiar, like he had had that same experience.
Mm-hmm.
So that's always really scary. Now, subsequently, we ended up going to California for my daughter's graduation in 2014. And we went out to dinner with Whitley and Ann the day after Jack had a regression. Now, I have my feeling about being regressed. He, on the other hand, felt very strongly that he wanted answers. So I said, I totally support you that you have to do this for you, but I really don't want to know about it because he had a memory of being with me during one of the experiences. And so I made him promise not to tell me what happened, which is really hard because you're in a relationship with somebody, who's an experiencer and you're wanting to support them through this, regression, which could be quite scary. So he had his regression with Yvonne Smith. they didn't get to finish because there was still so much more, and so they made it an appointment to finish up the next day. But the regression was just so draining and so hard on him that he had to cancel his next appointment. He said that although he was glad that he did it, on the other hand, he almost was, I'm gonna say regretful, but it's like opening Pandora's box because he had more questions and answers after his regression. And he remembered the visitation part that included me and actually discussed it with Yvonne during the regression and transcribed it, and I did read it. It's really hard for me to remember because I don't remember what happened, but he saw me on an examination table, and he also saw us walking down a hallway, both holding these tall, white beings, long, skinny arms and hands as we walked down a hallway, but he said he never saw the faces, only just the bodies, and they were long and skinny and white. So we walked into a hallway, and that's where I guess I had an examination, and he was brought into the room with me for emotional support. He remembers that clear as day. So that's quite frightening to me. I don't remember anything about it.
And you're kind of going, and that's why I didn't want to know, and that's why I don't want to be regressed. I mean, that stuff, Suzanne, gets so dark so quickly.
Yeah, it's hard even just sitting here thinking about it because, on the one hand, you don't want to know. And then there's, on the other hand, I had the experience on the craft where I was told that the cure for cancer was something we use every day. And then I was shown this symbol and all of that,
Mm-hmm.
and this, algebraic equation that was three-dimensional. So I actually was contacted by somebody that I had interviewed from my podcast, and that was Grant Cameron. And Grant, when he heard the story about my visitation, he and also Brett Oldham, another experiencer who had a very similar experience to mine on a craft, he wanted to pay for both of us to be regressed to get that information. And I declined. And I think he got angry with me because I didn't want to do it. But he was just adamant on getting this info. Do you know what I mean? And I'm like, it's not a game. I mean, this is my life.
You have to deal with that information the rest of your life. Yeah.
Exactly.
Oh, you know what? I think that on part 1, we did mention that you were going to send me a drawing of that symbol. So I want to make sure that this time we get that and that goes into the show notes because we wanted to send that out in the ether in case anyone else has seen that before.
Absolutely. I have not forgotten. Yes.
Well, yeah, because you're that experience of them carrying you back to your bed and they tuck you in, like I said, it's all nice, is so different than from Jack's. And right off the bat, he knew there was bad things and he was scared about going to sleep and all these other things. And it drove him to the point where he's like, well, I have to know. But then even that got too difficult.
Right. That's true. Well, also when he started doing a lot of meditation, he was like meditating regularly. And then at one point, his ex-wife, the one who passed away, told him that she woke up in the middle of the night and saw a beam of light coming down from the ceiling and into his forehead. So I thought that was really interesting. There's just so many things like, and his kids. So this is really weird. I remember they had he and his children had this shared dream experience where I think it was like in 2008. He was working nights, and one morning he had a really vivid, intense dream and had no idea what it was about. But when he woke up, he could hear people outside the house talking on like walkie-talkies or like handheld radios. And when he looked out the window, he saw these workers from the electric company working on the pole, like the electrical pole outside the house. they were removing the transformer for some weird reason. I mean, like, bizarre. It wasn't broken or anything. But he saw his daughter in the morning and she told her about the dream, but she couldn't remember, or he couldn't remember any details of the dream. And she looked at him and she said she had the same exact dream about the transformer. And then later on that day, he told his son about the dream and he said the same thing. So then he was like, well, wait a minute. How could the three of us have this shared dream? And at that one moment thought, wait a minute, they're involving my kids now. And then he got angry. So he thought, here I am going to work at night and my kids are here alone. I mean, they were older, but still, like he couldn't protect them.
Well,
the same thing that happened to me.
And then we go right to screen memories, right? Were those really human electrical workers out there, right?
Right, exactly. And then he also saw an orange orb right around the same time that I moved here. When he was working, because he worked in the yard at UPS, he would move trucks around, like the big trucks. And one night he saw an orange orb surrounded by about 5 or 6 smaller white orbs. And it streaked across the sky. And then he thought to himself, and this is what I think is really important because of the communication that a lot of people have with these UFOs. He thought in his head that if it's really a UFO, I want you to wiggle or change direction. And so it stopped and it wiggled and it went the opposite direction. And he knew that it was communicating with him, because what does that?
Has he tried that recently, or does he not want to mess with this stuff?
I think that it's one of those things to where you don't really know what you're inviting in. And I think it has to be organic, in the moment, and see what happens, what kind of communication, what kind of a vibe are you feeling from the situation. I think that's really important. We need to pay attention. Like, if you want to invite in negative energy, like a lot of times when you watch these ghost hunting shows and stuff, it's like, what are you doing? You don't know what you're inviting in. So,
well, how much do you guys think that, one of the bullet points that we already covered, it's titled Haunted House, but how much of this is tied into all these other things, UFOs and orbs and beings and astral projection? Is this all just the same thing?
it's all connected. It has to be. I mean, what are the odds that we're all having these experiences and they're all so similar?
And he happens to own a haunted house, which you end up moving into, right? Yeah.
Very true. Very true.
But he's had these experiences his whole life, as have you.
True. It's not only that, but it's like time slips, like time slips he's also had time slips and precognition. Like one time he let the dog out to go to the bathroom and then shut the door and went to make some tea. And then when he went to open the door to let the dog back in, the dog was sitting right next to him in the kitchen. So what happened?
Wow, that's weird.
Exactly. So anyway, and then a few times, this is really weird too. When I first moved here, when he was working for UPS and coming home for lunch at like 9:30 because his shift was so late, I would make dinner and then he would come home for lunch and then he'd go back. So one time I was cooking Thai food and he texted me and said, "Are you making Thai food right now? Because I can smell it." And I said, "I am." He just got a whiff of Thai food. Another time I was making cookies, chocolate chip cookies, and he texted me and asked me if I was making cookies, and I was. So there are no closed circuit cameras in this house. So
you want to know what's really strange, Suzanne? Just really quick. I just recorded 2 days ago with 2 women from Utah. It's your episode is going to come out this Thursday, and then theirs is going to be the next one. They have stories of angels, what they perceive as angels, and you'll love their episode as well. I'll probably end up doing a part 2 with them as well. But the smell of chocolate chip cookies came in to a couple of different of instances for their stories in regards to what they label as angels. And those stories are extremely unique, and I'll look forward to you hearing those. But I really can't believe that you just said that about the chocolate chip cookies, and I'm going to have to make sure that they listen to this episode as well.
That's so weird.
Yeah. Specifically chocolate chip cookies, not peanut butter, not sugar, chocolate chip cookies.
Interesting. Speaking of that is so weird. This just happened yesterday. So another weird story about smell is I took the dog out for a walk yesterday. To make a long story short, this is kind of weird. She has a poop problem and she holds it in too long, and sometimes she'll let out a little yelp, and it's so sad and I hate it. But, anyway, this happened yesterday. So she did her little duty right here in front of the house, and then I walked down the street, and she went again and she was fine. But when I came back from the walk, my husband said, "Let me ask you a question. Did she poop again after she did, after the one where she yelped?" And I said, "Yeah." He goes, "I smelled it." I said, "What?" He says, "I was sitting here on the sofa and all of a sudden I got this huge whiff of dog poop in my face." But it was like, about 2 minutes after we were in the front yard. I thought that was really weird. How could he have smelled that? I mean, I don't know. What does that even mean?
Well,
Just
especially after
bizarre.
the dog is supposed to be outside and it's inside, and he's like, where did that time go? I don't remember letting the dog in. What?
Right. In 1997, my husband's ex-wife was diagnosed with terminal cancer. It was very, very sad. She was at home with hospice care, and at the time, he was still working at UPS as a delivery driver. But one day during this period that she was in hospice, as he drove his route, he started noticing a shadow around his truck when he drove. Kind of like if there was something directly above the truck as he was like it was following him. So it was casting a shadow all the way around him. And it wasn't clouds or anything like that, or like the shadows from buildings or anything. So it really made him, I don't know, it affected him in the sense that he decided that he was just gonna go on disability and spend time at home with her until she passed. So, yeah, I don't know. It was quite an ominous feeling, maybe. Do you know what I'm saying? Like a
Right.
harbinger, maybe,
Like it was
of
really
death.
getting close, he felt, to the end, and it was time to spend as much time as he could with her.
That's what I thought as well.
Mm,
Yeah. I mean, she and his son had seen UFOs too. So, although they had seen UFOs, I don't think that they'd ever, well, I know his son has never expressed any experiences. His wife hadn't either said anything about having any visitations or anything. So, but yeah, I thought that was a weird, scary, sad feeling.
well, I mean, in the big picture here, I just think it's incredible the way you two connected, and then not only connected but found out about this shared this craft experience. It sounds like there's more than one, but you of course don't want to remember any of that.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know that I've ever spoken to anyone that's had that kind of a precursor and then ends up getting married to somebody, and it's just crazy. I mean, it's crazy in a good way because obviously you guys were meant to find each other.
Well, what I always said, that I truly believe that we choose our path before we incarnate onto this earth, and he believes that as well. And we think that we knew each other before this existence, and we made a pact that we would reconnect at some point in our lives. I'd like to believe that that's the case, and I'm sticking to it.
So I know that he canceled his second regressionist appointment. Can't blame him. Does he ever think, maybe I should go back through and finish that, or he's tapped out on that? He's all good.
You know what? I'm not sure. I think he thought about it. And we are actually going back to California in a couple of months, or actually in 6 weeks. But I don't know. Sometimes some things are just better left unknown.
No, I agree with that 100%. I mean, I think if I had little flashes of, things in my room or being floated through walls or a beam of light coming into my head or somebody seeing that, I don't know that I'd want to know the whole backstory around that any of those situations.
Right. I mean, if it doesn't serve you, then what's the purpose?
Yeah. Well, Suzanne, thank you so much for coming back for part 2. Will you please mention your blog, your podcast, anything else that you want to, and then, of course, the best place for people to contact you?
Sure, no problem. So my podcast is called Random Alien Brain Droppings at podbean.com or anywhere you listen to your podcasts. And my blog is abducteeawareness.blogspot.com. It's also called Random Alien Brain Droppings. And if you would like to get in touch with me about anything that you've heard today or just anything in general, if you want to share your story, my email address is abducteeawareness@gmail.com.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And this time around, we'll make sure to put that symbol in the show notes.
Yes.
And then everything will be linked for you guys. If you missed jotting down what she just said about where to contact her or her blog or the podcast, just go to the show notes for this episode. Well, Suzanne, thank you so much.
Shannon, have a great day. It's really nice chatting with you.